we don't expand our imagination,
justification for being what you are.
And welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Bob Orr. Well, this Friday brings some breaking news from Washington. The oldest Supreme Court Justice, John Paul Stevens, has announced that he will retire, as some speculated, this summer. With us now, CBS News legal correspondent Diane Crawford, a longtime Supreme Court insider. Well, you kind of called this. You said it was coming. What about the timing?
Well, I mean, that was the only thing that was surprising, that he announced it today instead of, say, next week or the following week. We've long thought he was going to step down. He's 89 years old. He served the longest on this court, almost 35 years. And he gave us a real clue last November when he confirmed that he'd hired only one law clerk. Now, that's the number of law clerks retired justices get. So, in a way, Justice Stevens told the White House everything they needed to know without ever saying a word, and that's very much true to Justice Stevens' character. I mean, he's very crafty, he's very eccentric, and so we have, yes, expected this, and the White House has expected it. They've been getting ready for this. They've got a working short list of candidates, so I think now it's kind of Katie bar the door, and let's get ready for a big confirmation hearing come summer.
It was kind of interesting the way it played out. We got word that the president, who was coming back from overseas, got word on Air Force One.
Right, from his White House counsel, called him and said that they had gotten the letter about 10:30 this morning. Stevens had that letter delivered to the White House, and that's what the justices typically like to do. If you think back, that's how Justice O'Connor kind of broke her news of her retirement, by when she delivered that letter to the White House and then to her colleagues as well. So, you know, the White House, again, I think was not surprised by this news. And the only thing that I think may have caught some people off guard was that, you know, it's a beautiful Friday here in Washington, and maybe people were thinking they'd try to sneak out a little early, but, you know, it's going to be a lot of talk about Justice Stevens today.
And a long day for you, too. Now, the best parlor game of the moment begins. So now, what's next? Who are the top contenders? What should we look for?
Well, the great thing for the Obama White House is that they've just gone through this. Remember last year when they replaced Justice Souter, who stepped down, with Sonia Sotomayor. So they cast a very wide net then. They started vetting candidates. They started doing the background research. So they already have a very good working shortlist of potential replacements for Justice Stevens. And I've focused really at this point on three. Two are women, both taught at the University of Chicago Law School, my alma mater. The first is Elena Kagan. She's the Solicitor General. She argues the United States position in the Supreme Court. Former Dean of Harvard Law School. Judge Diane Wood on the Chicago-based Federal Appeals Court. Once worked in the Antitrust Division. Very highly regarded Federal Appeals Court judge. And then there's Merrick Garland, a guy here on the D.C.-based Federal Appeals Court. He would probably be the easiest to confirm. He's perceived as somewhat moderate on criminal issues, but there are a lot of voices calling for a woman. You know, in this court of 9, there's only 2 women. So you're hearing a lot of voices saying we'd like to see another woman put on that court. And at the end of the day, I think it comes down to how much of a fight does this White House want. I mean, remember, they just went through that bruising, bitter fight over health care, and are they ready now to turn back to another fight over a judge?
And no matter who it is, it's not going to change the balance of power. The liberal bloc is still going to be in the minority.
That's exactly right. Justice Stevens was really the anchor, though, of that liberal wing. There are 4 liberals on this court, 5 conservatives. Conservatives still carry the day, and they will. But President Obama will get his second chance now to put his own stamp on this court, and he will preserve that seat for a liberal for another generation. So I think there's a lot of thought now inside the White House, my sources tell me, of looking at someone who could affect the court in a strategic way. His last nominee, the White House thought very politically. Sonia Sotomayor was the first Hispanic. That was looked at as a political choice, not someone who would really have a lot of impact in building coalitions and making a big difference on the court itself. This go around, though, I think they're going to look much more strategically about how the nominee and the new justice would affect the internal dynamics of the Supreme Court.
Well, taking that as kind of a paradigm, then, does that augur for one candidate over another? What's your best guess?
My best guess is the nominee is going to be the Solicitor General, Elena Kagan. She is very savvy. She's very collegial. She has a lot of support from conservatives who really like her, in the way that John Roberts had friendships and support from some liberals. She hired a lot of conservative young law professors when she was dean at Harvard Law School. Some of the Federal Appeals Court judges here that are pretty much on the solid right really like her, and she's young, dynamic, and could be seen as someone who could go in and try to build those coalitions and really be a force on the left, a prominent voice on the left, to take the big shoes of John Paul Stevens.
And fairly easily confirmed, do you think, or would that be a big fight?
I think that she's probably the second. She's kind of in the middle. I think Diane Wood, again, very accomplished. She has a lot of support. She's worked very closely with some rock-solid conservative judges in Chicago, Frank Easterbrook and Richard Posner. They're very much on board for her nomination. But she's had quite a few controversial abortion decisions, and she's 60 years old, or will be. So I think Kagan's probably in the middle. If you rank them on order of controversy, you know, it would be Garland's the easiest, the guy here with the conservative, more conservative on criminal issues, then Kagan, and then Wood. And so I'm looking maybe that it'll just settle somewhere in the middle.
Now, I know you're busy, but before you run, I know you know Justice Stevens pretty well. You talk to him at length. I mean, we know him as a public figure. He plays tennis still in an advanced stage. But what can you tell us about Justice Stevens?
You know, Justice Stevens will really be missed on the Supreme Court because he was very well liked among his colleagues. But he's also extremely eccentric and fiercely independent. Remember, he's the one that always wore the bow ties and had the little sparkle in his eye. Right. And one of the things I think is most telling about him is that the justices, and you know, this is kind of a strange place, the Supreme Court. They have a lot of routines and traditions, and so before they take the bench for argument, they go to a robing room where people help them put on their heavy black robes, and then they go sit on the bench. Well, Justice Stevens does that on his own. You know, he's so independent, he can get in his own robe all by himself, and that's kind of how he's seen the law. His opinions can sometimes be hard to predict in their reasoning. He's very independent. And again, as we saw today, he did this on his own terms. He could serve another year if he wanted to, but he decided on his own. Now was the time for him to go, and he was going to do it today on Friday morning.
Well, he leaves a great legacy. Jan, thanks very much.
Thanks.
We don't expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.